Hello, welcome to Revelator Alf. How you doing? Thanks for joining me today in the workshop, really. I'm going to be going through quite a few questions. I'm really talking about motorcycle electrics today, and I'm going to get onto Harley Davidson specific stuff. If you got any questions, by all means, just fire them in there, and I'll try and answer them as we go along. But say, hopefully, you'll get a lot out of this, and I'm just going to basically talk about general bike electrics and modern bikes versus older bikes, electrical tools, the kind of things that you might want to think about getting if you haven't already got them. Maybe share some of your experiences as well. I'm going to talk really about the old way of thinking about motorcycle electrics, in that it's just about power, positive and negative, as opposed to modern motorcycle electrics. It's all about signals, really. And then I'm going to go really touch a little bit on the history of the electrical system, and then I'm really going to talk about the Harley Softail, that kind of thing, and break down the electrical system for you a little bit. I'll talk a little bit specifically about spark plugs. I'm going to talk a little bit about the battery, and the kind of places on the bike where you can access different things, and I'm going to kind of reference old videos which I've already made, and then where you can add things and where you really should leave it alone, really. And then I'm kind of going to talk about basically keeping your system healthy and also keeping it in check as well. Right, let me just adjust this camera here. But say, I hope you're all well. Anyway, it's a little bit, there we go. Right, let me just get back to the comments. Richard, hello, how are you? Dave B, hello, how are you? Thank you for joining here. Right, so first of all, I'm in the workshop. I've changed the angles a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm having major problems with these webcams which I have, so I do apologize for the quality of the video, the live stream the other day. I looked back on it afterwards, and I wasn't really impressed with the whole quality. I've got to say, I'm still not 100%. I'm not really happy with this layout either, but I am waiting on parts, because basically what I'm going to do is try and do the live streams with GoPros, which will be much better quality, and they'll immediately adapt for the light as well, for the exposure as well. So hopefully that will improve your experience a little bit. That's coming. I'm just waiting on those parts. I might do another test video live today if they come in. If they do, great. If they don't, I'll wait until next time. Anyway, right, so first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the general bike electrics as I see it. Scoot, hello there. You made it. You did make it. Well done. I hope you're well in Germany there. Yeah, so general bike electrics. I mean, let's face it, most people don't really like bike electrics at all, do they? Or they kind of fear it. They kind of think, I don't really want to be messing with it. Most people can turn their hand to the mechanical side, but less kind of turn it to the electrical side. Some of the bikes that I've built in the past, some of the bikes that I've worked on in the past, let's say, the electrical system has been very simple. Modern bikes they definitely are more complex, but in some ways they're actually quite simple as well. But you kind of got to differentiate between the electrical system as we would know it from old, and this kind of this signal based system that most motorcycles, or certainly most new motorcycles, have on as well. So it's an interesting one. When we talk about old electrics, the problems with old bikes, and even with new bikes, actually, a lot of it is derived from electrics. I get lots of emails from lots of people all over the world, not necessarily Harley riders, but all Softail riders, because that's what I ride, and a lot of the content that I've produced is based upon that, of course. But they're asking me, it's okay, I've got a problem with this bike here, it's not doing this, or and one of the first questions I ask is, have you checked your wiring, have you checked your battery terminal, have you checked this? And sometimes the feedback coming back isn't that great afterwards after these suggestions, but a lot of the problems that people have is down to the basic electrical issue around the bike, or electrical problem around the bike. So hey, hello there. Hey, can you everybody just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay, by the way, or do you want me to get closer to the microphone? I've got them a little microphone here. I do have this microphone here, like a proper studio one, but unfortunately, because I'm running a multi-camera setup right now, I can't plug that in on my laptop. But it's with this new equipment coming in, I should be able to run multiple cameras and have the other microphone in as well. But as long as you can hear me, that's all the main thing. So, back onto the electrical system. Mindful Gus, hello. Richard Perry, loud and clear. Thank you very much. Thank you very good. So a lot of bike problems, what we think are mechanical problems, are more often than not, they're electrical problems. And it could be, that, oh, it's a bad earth. So many times people will say to me, oh, yeah, the problem, what it is, it's a bad earth. The problem is, it's not necessarily a bad earth, especially in modern bikes. Actually, what it is, it's a bad signal. And I'm going to kind of touch on this a little bit later on. It's not necessarily bad earth, it's a bad signal. Now, we've got an older bikes, you could basically take away all the electrical or all the wiring loom, and you could replace it wire for wire, let's say, and you could still do that now. The problem is that the signal based system that we have now on these motorcycles, that are basically just, the power doesn't go via those signal cables, it actually goes to a control box, let's say, and at the other end where your component is, let's say a light or a, I don't know, whatever, there's a receiving end, and basically the power to the box is sending a signal to that other component to switch it on, switch it off, let's say. So that's where the signal comes from. And that's what makes up, on the Harley Davidsons, the CAN bus system. On different other motorcycles, you'll have, Bosch, whatever, cars, you'll have different levels of OBD, or, whatever. Scoot, I had a cable under the tank of a 1969 early shovel head touching the frame. Took ages to find the problem. Sound is good. Thank you very much. Yeah, look, I'm going to talk about that as well, because that's exactly what happened to me as well. So a lot of the problems when we're talking about bad earthing or bad, it's a bad connection somewhere. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad earth, or it could be more likely that it's shorting out. And that's problem is because the signal, then the power signal, isn't always, you get an interrupted signal from wherever you are, from wherever it's being sent to the final destination, and then it's not getting the proper power or the proper signal. So yeah, I mean, I had exactly the same with an old bike which I produced. I put a solo sprung seat on it, and what happened, and I put an old sort of it wasn't a peanut tank, it was a Mustang tank on this hardtail chop which I made. Anyway, I thought I was being really clever, and I was going to say, right, okay, I'm going to take all this wiring apart from this old bike. I'm going to basically throw it away. That's what I did. I just threw all the wiring. Sometimes, especially with older bikes, and especially when you're customizing wiring, it's actually easy just to throw it away, as opposed to trying to work out little problems. And also the problem with older bikes, a lot of the time, that wiring has been messed around with a little bit, or it's just old wiring. Anyway, I digress. The point is, I try to be really clever, and I thought I'd put the wiring through the frame as proper custom bike builders do, make it look all clean. And basically what happened was, when I went to bolt down the tank, I had a little gap in the frame from the rear side, from under the seat. I put this kind of it was a long reach screwdriver. No, it was a long reach screwdriver with a spanner taped on it, so I could get on there and then bolt it in from the top. Anyway, a bit of a contraption, but it worked. Kevin Spalding, hello there. Hello, how are you? Yes, you well? How's your Road King special? All right. I'm sure it's a Road King special you got, or just a Road King. I can't remember which you got. Anyway, so exactly the same happened to me. As I was tightening up the bolt, I pinched one of the wires, and it's one of the power wires, and basically just I couldn't work out for the life of me why my wiring was going haywire, because I checked everything. I checked everything. Well, I'm getting power here. I'm getting power there. I'm getting power there. And what happened was, I wasn't just getting enough power, or I wasn't getting the right signal, and it was just being shorted out, and it was just a right pain in the ass. So, bike electrics hasn't really changed in that respect. You've got to have good signal, you've got to have good integrity, everything's got to be buttoned down properly. One of the biggest causes of issues with motorcycles in particular, but cars as well, is actually where the power is coming from initially. If the battery is dead, or if the battery has got a problem with it for whatever reason, then it's not going to be able to deliver enough power to your electrical system. If, let's say, your alternator is not working properly, and then your voltage regulator is not working properly, then your battery is not going to be getting the proper charge that it requires to supply the system. And I know there are different systems, but essentially you're going to have a battery system, your battery, then your starter, and then you're going to have obviously your alternator, voltage regulator, and then you're going to have basically your battery power feeding the whole electrical system. So there's lots of areas on the motorcycle or on the car or anywhere that you could have electrical problems. But one of the first things you should always look at, as I always say to everybody who kind of emails me, so I got a problem here, check your battery first. Check that battery. Virtually every owner's manual, every service manual would kind of start there. They'll start at the basics. The start of the start of the electrical process, if you know what I mean, and then you work on from there. So always make sure with the Softail batteries in particular, there has been quite a few incidents of them overheating, of issues like that, dropping charge, everything. If you find that you've got a vehicle, whatever it is, and you're constantly having to change your battery, and they're bona fide batteries, they're not some cheap batteries that you've bought somewhere off some dodgy person, then the likelihood is it's not the battery, it's more like it's a charging issue, and they could be being overcharged and being worked too hard. So so that's it. Poor battery maintenance updates. So I'm going to talk about battery care a little bit later on, and trickle chargers, battery tenders, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so the reason why the electrical system changed on motorcycles and cars and everything, and the history behind this, or the electrical history behind this, has always come from the likes of aviation and NASA, places like that were looking at weight saving options to be able to not only power their systems, but also to be able to monitor and interrogate those systems as well. So let's just say you're a pilot, or you're an astronaut in your cockpit, and you have to be able to control a thruster somewhere else there. Well, there's no point in having miles and miles of cabling going backwards and forwards between the two, because essentially you're just going to add too much weight. Now, that's what they would do in the old days, of course, in the very early days of aviation and cars and things like that. But actually, they had to find a way to save weight, save space, make everything more energy efficient. So that's kind of how it all developed from aviation And then if you look at racing applications, it's a similar kind of thing. A lot of technology that we see in cars and bikes now all comes from aviation, space, racing technology. Then you get the OBD systems on cars. You get Bosch. You get the CAN bus system being developed as well. Harley kind of go their way. Suzuki, I think they have their own proprietary system as well. But essentially, it's the same thing. Instead of having lots and lots of thick cabling all over the motorcycle, you could actually have lots and lots of cabling, let's say, but it's small. It's small cable. It's small wiring. So you're saving space. It's not so demanding of the electrical system because you're only sending low power signals through there, because you're basically having a starter box, whatever it is, the ECM, the BCM. It's sending out a signal via these low power wiring, let's say, or low capacity wiring to the destination, the component, and it's telling it to switch on, switch off, everything like that. So you can change the wiring, you can change the process, but essentially all you were doing is making that process of switching things on and off more efficient, and you're saving weight. And if you're making something more efficient, it's a lower power going through the wiring, let's say, then the likelihood is there's going to be less heat generated, and it's going to last longer. Do you know what I mean? So that's the reason why things have changed, or things have evolved over a period of time. Santos, hello from Seaside, California. Hello there. How are you? Thank you for joining in again. So there's lots of reasons why the electrical system has changed over the years, and what I find really interesting is how different manufacturers have gone in different directions with their motorcycles. If you want to consider you're going to be working on your bike from home, there's actually and modern engines are no different from old engines. They still effectively, especially Harley Davidsons, right? They're still working exactly the same way as they did before. There's one piston going that way, there's another piston going that way, and then it kind of goes, it sucks and pushes and compresses and bangs and pushes out and all that kind of stuff. It's exactly the same. It's kind of doing this thing all the time, but how it's controlled electrically, how the bike is controlled electrically, that's all changed, of course. Eric McIntosh, hello from Ontario, Canada. Hello there. The DTC for my 883 are the same. Yeah, okay. As for my Ford F-150, yeah, okay. So your error codes, yeah. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. That's right. That's what that's what it's all about. And different engines have different ways of doing it, of course. Anyway, that's going off a different tangent. I really want to just talk about motorcycle electrics here and how it relates to Harleys, how it relates to all motorcycles, really. So in the olden days, in days gone by, if you got an old bike, or let's say if I went to buy an old bike now, one of the problems that you would have is either trying to find original stock equipment, or what you'd have to do to make that bike run again, you'd have to try and find a way to put modern electronics or modern tech on there to put to make it work. And most notably, you go from a point system, electronic ignition, all that kind of stuff, and those are the things that you can upgrade on older motorcycles. On new motorcycles, pretty much everything is done for you. There's not a lot that you need to do. So where do you make your alterations on a new bike? Well, you're probably going to change lighting. You're probably going to change something like headlight, probably, turn indicators, turn signals, headlight, maybe tail light, that kind of thing. You may go from a system of where you got bulbs. You might want to go to an LED. LEDs are more less power demanding, so a lot more efficient. Then what else are you going to do? Well, the only other thing you're going to do is add accessories. So within each bike, you're going to be able to either go with the electrical signal system that is, via what on the Harley they call the CAN bus system, and it's all on ignition. It will send a signal, or you can circumnavigate that and just go direct to the battery, and then you have your own external system. So it's it really depends what you want to do. Everything is changeable, especially if you're doing on an external system. Let's just say if you're just feeding everything off the battery and you've got a separate isolating switch, you can do it. The problem is that anytime you connect something directly to the battery, you could be overloading that battery, or you could be drawing too much power from it, and that might affect the rest of the systems on the bike. So you could have problems in that respect. So there's lots of, when you're talking about updating electrics or adding accessories to motorcycles, especially if you're talking about different lighting, different accessories, a sat nav, for example, I don't know, USB power chargers, all this kind of stuff, anything that you want to upgrade your horn, all this kind of stuff. If you try and use the CAN bus system, let's say just the standard power system for the original parts, it might not be sufficient to power what you're trying to power, because, as I say, it's a signal-based system rather than a power system, and your aftermarket accessory might be a power system, so it needs direct power from the battery. And what I mean by that, it might be that a lot of the systems on the bike are running off a reduced voltage, let's say 5 volts, for example, and yours requires 12 volts. So you might have to go to the battery direct, So there's lots of things that, you can do on a new bike. A lot of things you really shouldn't mess with. But there's definite ways in which you can add accessories. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Okay, I want to talk briefly about tools. Right, okay, so one of the things... Oh, I've got to show you this, by the way. Look at this. Hold on. Wait a minute. Look at that. All right. There you go. Can you see me? Oh, look at that. Right, so what I'm going to take this off. I forgot to try and turn it off, by the way. There we go. Right. The reason I got this, actually, is because when you're working along, and then, if you need some light on something, really, instead of holding a torch in your mouth and you're trying to light something like that. This is actually for a reading, by the way. But, it works. I think it works. Oh, there you go. Yeah, okay, let's just go through some of these questions. Lots of sensors on modern Harleys. If the system isn't 100%, it will flag as faults. This is why the battery needs always to be at the top of its game, especially without accessories. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, an old Triumph that I had, well, not an old Triumph, a Triumph that I had, it was constantly throwing off sensor issues, Yeah, you need to know what the load power requirements are. And this is where I say, whenever you're adding accessories to motorcycle, especially if it's going to be lighting, always go for LED lighting now. Even if you've got an older bike, try and find a way to put LED lighting on there. Try and put turn signals, try and do an LED conversion, because that's actually going to reduce the power demand on stuff as well. So on and so forth. Right, the shining ball, yes. Very good. Anyway, so these are really good. So if you got this, you want to light up your subject. I don't know, is that? I'm kind of looking at my reflection here. There we go. Look at that. Perfect. There you go. Right. The next thing to do, I'm sure many of you have already got one of these. Mine is absolutely knackered. I need to get a new one, but it kind of works. So I'm always patching this up. This is a multimeter, right? Okay, so just now I have seen, let me just turn this off. I have seen lots of videos and lots of online blogs explaining all the different things that you need to know about these, right? Oh, crikey. What can I say? In in all my years of working on bikes and cars and things like that, the only thing you really need this is for checking the batteries. On the left hand dial here, you'll see a DC supply, and because we all run off a 12-volt system, let's say either an old money, it'd be a 6-volt system. You know, if you're going up to a 20-volt, a 24-volt system, I believe a lot of trucks, lorries operate there. But if you're just running motorcycles, which I'm kind of talking about today, you only ever need one setting, which is the 20 volt setting there, and that will pick up any voltage in that 12-volt range, let's say, and you'll see 12 or 12.4 or 13.5, whatever. The other thing, which you could now, all on this side, it's all about amps as well, and then you got AC voltage. Well, AC voltage is not relevant mostly when we're talking for motorcycles. And the other thing is just this ohmmeter. How do you pronounce it? Ohmmeter? Ohmmeter. Anyway, at the bottom, you're basically changing the inline resistance of any particular cable or whatever. Now, you're never going to really need to know this, mostly, unless a particular circuit on your bike or a wiring requires a certain level of resistance. Let's just say you have a physical resistor which you have to test the integrity of, then there's going to be markings on there, and lots of different ones. You can look them up for the different color markings, will tell you what the ohms resistance is of that resistor. But actually you can just test it on here. Let's just say if you want to test the continuity of a particular wire going through. And when I talk about continuity, as we all kind of know, all you're doing, let me get a bit of metal here, whatever this is, right? This is plastic, but pretend it's metal. All you want to know is there a continual signal from this point to this point? And when I talk about signal, what are you sending a current through it? Is there a break in there that it's not allowed to pass through? All that kind of stuff. It's called continuity. And basically, all you'll want to do is test to see whether this, whatever it is, wire, cable, bit of metal, fuse, is able to take this power, let's say, through it. Is it an intact wire? If it is, great. Some might say that you need a certain resistance on there, so you would test the resistance, and you put one wire on one end, another wire on a probe, I should say, a probe on another end, and you put it on the different ohm setting there, and you would see basically what it is. That it might give you a particular resistance reading on it, and then you can match that up what it's supposed to be. I see a lot of people have tried to say, okay, use this ohmmeter to test the continuity, which you can, there's no problem. But actually, on most, you have this kind of setting right at the bottom, this continuity testing setting right there. Let me see if I can get you there. There we go. And basically, all you need to do is, if you put the two wires together, can you hear that? All that does is, okay, I've got a continuous current going through there. If I try to test a different component, there we go. That's because it's metal. It's going. There we go. So it's all. It's, getting a multimeter, one of these. I'm not saying this particular one, any one. As I say, mine's old. I really need to get a new one. But you're only going to need it for basic functions, and that's really testing the battery, testing wiring, testing, lighting, holders, that kind of thing, bulb holders, as it were. You just want to see if power is getting to there or signal is getting to there. That's all you're doing, really. It's very basic stuff, but probably one of the most useful bits of equipment that you can have on in your workshop, on your thing. So if you haven't got that, great. Anyway, so that's one of the things, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about is if you ever have to do wiring on your bike, or you want to add electrical components, then you're going to need some kind of, well, you don't need it, but it's probably wise to get something, a wire stripper, something like that, or right, hold on. Any kind of wire strippers, and these are heavy duty ones. You can get different sizes, of course. Build up your tools to enable you to be able to strip the wires, join them together. I mean, I'm not going to the whole ways of being able to join wires and solder wires and everything. Having a good soldering iron is really good. But again, you've got to think about moving with the times as well. Lots of things that we'll do in the past about just joining wires together and wrapping it in insulation tape. Well, a lot of the problems came from that, because do you know what? You could that wiring might break or whatever. It wasn't a very solid connection. Maybe you didn't put enough electrical insulation tape around it. Maybe what happened was it allowed moisture to get in there, and that corroded it, and it wasn't very good. All that kind of stuff. So then you say, right, okay, then what we'll do, we'll just get crimper wiring connectors, which are these kind of things, right? Those kind of things. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And you decide, right, okay, I'm going to have just put all that, a good solid connection, put the wiring through, and it works, right? But again, if it isn't sealed up properly, then you've got to think, right, okay, well, maybe moisture can get in there, all that kind of stuff. So then we talk about soldering, wiring together, wrapping it in insulation tape afterwards. And then you think, okay, well, maybe that's not working very well. So then another technique is then to put an insulation piece over the wire that you just joined, heat it up so it shrinks, and that will help to with the integrity, but also prevent against moisture in there as well. One of the problems of older bikes especially is getting moisture into electrical connections as well. It's still a problem really for big modern bikes, but less so. Virtually every electrical connection now is moisture sealed, especially on, if we're talking about Harley Davidsons, there are moisture seals or rubber seals around the electrical connection. So there isn't really an issue like that anymore of new connections. Obviously, I'm sure over time they might degrade a little bit, so you might have to replace those. But in terms of just modern connections, they're usually pretty good, certainly a lot better than they were years ago. So when you start to change things on your bike, you want to start cutting wires, adding bits and pieces left, right, and center. You need to not only think about the electrical connection which you're making sure it's a proper electrical connection. You need to look at the integrity of that connection as well. You might want to consider soldering it, but you also want to think about actually protecting it from the environment, not the environment, the moisture, all that kind of stuff. And then you want to think, actually, is there anything modern right now that I can use that actually joins wiring together properly and will keep it really secure and also keep out moisture? So there's lots of new electrical type of connections which you can just stick the wires in, heat it up, it solders it at the same time, and it automatically seals it as well. So there's lots of stuff. There's lots of stuff that you can do, but having different sorts of tools to strip wires, all that kind of stuff, works well. I'm not saying you need that, because you can achieve the same thing as I was talking about in the previous live stream. You can achieve the same thing with other types of tools to do the same thing. You just need to be a bit, be able to use those tools, as it were. Okay, so that's basically that, right? So, if you're going to have a tool, get yourself a multimeter if you haven't already got one. I'm sure you have it. And I'd say most of the uses of a multimeter on a motorcycle or a car are very basic. You don't really need to know that much. I'm purely talking here about doing work at home. I'm not talking about being a professional technician, mechanic, auto electrician. I'm not talking about that. I'm purely talking about being a home one. But anyway, right. So other things that you'll probably build up in time, obviously fuses, different fuses for different bikes, different size fuses. And then you have electrical connectors as well. As I say, I've got a whole drawer full of different types of electrical connectors, and you kind of just build them up. Over a period of time. So there's lots of things that you can do to not only tap into the electrical system on a vehicle, on a motorcycle, but you've also got to know about making sure the wiring is tight. Make sure that it's not going to come undone. Make sure that it's not going to interfere with other wiring as well. But also you've got to make sure that whatever you've done doesn't interfere. The electrical load that you're going to draw from you tapping in there is not going to affect every other system. So that's where you need to make sure that you're tapping. If you are going to tap into the electrical system, you've got to make sure that it's not going to affect anything else. So if you watch my video when I did when I added auxiliary lighting as well, I showed you specifically how to add an extra wire, how to tap into the negative signal wire as well, all that kind of stuff, and that's where you could do it. Other systems, other videos which I showed you is about adding accessory harnesses which basically bypass or you interrupt the 12-volt supply around your motorcycle. You put in an adapter there and then you just feed off. You can have these adapters for the front of the bike or for under the seat as well. But essentially what you're doing, you're spurring off. But here's the word of warning, is if you start adding lots of accessories and you start drawing power at the same time, then there's a good chance that you might overload the system and other parts of the bike might not work properly, or you might overload the battery and there isn't enough charge on the battery to keep everything working properly. And that's why you might start getting error codes, faults on your bike as well. Lots of this, it comes back to when you find something that's not working on your bike. If something is not working on your bike for whatever reason, the chances are that either something is degraded, electrical connection is degraded for whatever reason, or there is a problem with the component that you've added that is causing a problem elsewhere. So let's just say if you've overloaded the system, now, what happens is a lot of people don't understand with charging the battery with your alternator. The alternator on the left-hand side of the engine, okay, that will charge the motorcycle battery via the voltage regulator at an optimum RPM. It really depends, engine RPM this is. It really depends your motorcycle and what engine RPM that is. Most motorcycles, most cars, most everything, will have a minimal charge when the engine is idling. Okay, so that let's just say on a Harley Davidson, that charge when the engine is idling is not enough to charge the battery. There's actually a draw on the battery when the motorcycle is idling, especially if you've got lots and lots of accessories on at the same time. What you need to do, you start going above 1,000 to 1,500, 2,000 RPM, let's say, then that will start to produce charge for them. So let's just say if you are, you're going on a tour on your motorcycle and you want to start charging everything right from the very start. You want to start charging, cameras, phones, whatever. You want to have all your auxiliary lights on, everything on. Everything is powered. Well, as soon as you start taking off, you start riding off, the last thing you want to do is have everything on at the same time. What you want to do is gradually add it as you're riding along. And I'm talking about your lights and everything. Don't switch everything on at the same time. Even if your battery, even if your electrical system can handle it, just moderate what you're using at the same time, because the last thing you want to do, these harnesses, these additional harnesses you put on, they're not designed for you to use everything at the same time. They're designed for you to be able to have different electrical accessories on in turn. Okay, so be that in mind. If you feel that you really have to have everything on at exactly the same time, the only thing that you could do is go for an upgrade of your alternator on your motorcycle. And yeah, I mean, that could be an expensive proposition, but you're going to have to get that. You're probably going to have to change your voltage regulator as well to cope with that. So you're basically pumping more electrical charge into the battery to cope with it. So there we go. What's this? Sorry, I'm just going through here. Some of the questions. Right, Dave B is laughing. Electrician snobbery. I don't know what that means. My favorite is the field piece multimeter. Okay, David. Yeah. Okay. I'll talk about multimeters. Yeah, there could be anyone. What do you think of your tires? My tires, my Avon Cobra Chrome's absolutely fine. Yeah, really good. Dave B, new one on me. Are you sure, Alf? Am I sure, Alf? What? Sorry, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be not sure about there. Let me know. Tell us exactly what you mean. So anyway, so that is on the Softails and everything. So if you have a problem with you got to be careful with how you're tapping into your electrical system, or anything that you're going external of the electrical system and going directly to the battery, how much draw that is, okay, how much power drain that is from the battery. Then you got to think about how much electrical accessories are you attaching and how many are you going to have on at the same time, how much power is that going to draw from the battery, and crucially, how much can the alternator charge the battery? Dave B, about the charge on idle. Yes, I'm absolutely positive about that. That is absolutely true. Most motor cars do not charge optimally. They charge, but they don't charge at optimal rate when the engine is idle. Every bike, every car is going to be different, of course, and they'll require a different buffer. But there will be, at a very low idle, there would be an issue. And that's why you could find, let's say on a winter's day, if you've got all your lights on and everything, on older cars I'm talking, or older bikes, you might see your lights flickering or dimming in and out a little bit. That's because there's not enough charge on the battery, and the alternator isn't enough to actually charge that battery circuit and then power all your systems. You start adding a bit of throttle, and then all of a sudden it will give you enough. This is all bearing in mind, considering that you've got to have the battery is in good condition as well, and your alternator is working properly, and your voltage regulator is working properly. All these things I'm kind of taking for granted, if you know what I mean. If all those things are working properly, then you've just got to make sure that you've got to control what accessories or what power that you've drawn, what load that you're putting on the system. Because bear this in mind, you've only got 12 volts. You've only got 12 volts. So let's say if you talk about going in a camper van, right? You want to go and do on an overland camping expedition, let's say, and you want to have all these accessories in the back of your van. well, you can't just run it off the vehicle battery, because guess what? You're not going to have enough power to do it all. The alternator won't be big enough. So what they have leisure batteries, right? And some kind of charging system, maybe a solar system that is able to power that. It's exactly the same on motorcycles, cars, whatever. You've only got a certain amount of power from the battery voltage, let's say, and current that's coming out of that is going to enable you to power all your systems. So you can't even just overload it. That's a big thing. David Fuentes is like a trickle charger at idle. Yes, that's right. It is kind of trickle charging, maybe not to that degree, but it's kind of trickle charging. But the problem is that your motorcycle system is drawing power from your battery. So whilst it's a lot more than trickle charging at idle, what it's doing is there's a bit of a shortfall. You're actually losing more power because you're powering the systems, then you're actually feeding into the battery. That's the reason why. That's the thing I don't like about new bikes, can't turn the lights off at all. Do you know what, Richard? Actually, I'm with you. I don't particularly like that, but that's legislation more than the motorcycle companies. I particularly don't like it. I particularly feel this in the winter, and I think this on the Harley as well, because of the way it starts. They are kind of sluggish to start. I just think it's it's a, yeah. I wish there wasn't this notion that you had to have your lights on all the time via a relay, and everything. Sonic Sonics on a motorcycle, isn't it called a stator instead of an alternator? Well, it is your alternator, but you've got two parts to it. So you've got a stator, and then you've got the rotor. So the stator is the part that is rigidly attached to the motorcycle casing, and that's the one that's sorry, did I say stator? That's what I meant, stator. And that's got all the electrical windings on, and that's what creates the current, as it were, your AC current, AC voltage, and then your rotor is the one with the magnets, and it goes around and it creates this kind of field effect which generates the power. But it's still an alternator. It's still, whatever you want to go. Jay, sounds like you're making a case for keeping your battery on tender when not in use. Yeah. Okay. Sounds like you're making a bit of a case for keeping your battery on a tender when not in use. Well, absolutely right. I would definitely say that. To that point, yes. Always keep your battery on a tender if you can. So your alternator doesn't have as much work to do after starting. Well, possibly. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily, have your battery on a tender just to, for your alternator, because your alternator is just going to charge your battery up, and it might take a little bit long. I mean, what I would say is, if you're going to start your engine, take it for a half an hour ride, give it a good ride, give it a good chance for the alternator to charge it up. But it's not really going to be that much of an issue once you've started your engine. If you have a low battery for whatever reason, and because you haven't had it on a tender, just go and give your bike a really long run and it should be fine. The problem is that you might have a duff battery there afterwards, so always have it on. Dave B here, cheap trickle chargers kill batteries. Look, I'm sure it's the same in any component, isn't it? You get a cheap variant, or you get a decent one as well. Adding a voltmeter can help monitor the health of the alternating. See, safely handles extra electrical current. Yeah, so I mean, that's why you get one of these multimeters as well. You can actually put it across the terminals of the battery, and you can see exactly how much charge is going into the battery, and then how much charge, how much drain is coming away from that battery as well. You could also see, let's say, with everything switched off on the bike, you can put your multimeter across the battery terminals, and you can actually, if you stay there long enough, you can see if there's actually any drain. If there's drain on that battery, if it's dropping charge, then either you got a duff battery or you got a real problem with the bike. One of the problems with adding accessories that some people don't fully understand is that if you've got it directly connected to the battery and it's not on this CAN bus ignition system, then basically what will happen is that you can just drain that battery and you don't even know it. So it's a good way. So as I can't handle this. I can't vouch for this enough. Right. Okay. So lots of things. Crikey, I've been going for an hour here. I need to have a little drink. Oh, let me just change over to this this system here. Right. Sorry about that. The camera angle. Right. Anyway, so we talked a little bit about. Well, basically everything on your bike, really, haven't we? So the new electric system, it's exactly the same as the old electrical system, but as I say, it's just a different way of doing it, just a different process. So with your electrical system, say you've got the battery, you got your fuses, you got your starter motor, your alternator, your stator, your rotor, voltage regulator, which also includes the rectifier as well, which, you know, you've got, not only have you got to limit the amount of power, charging power that goes from the alternator to the battery, because you don't want to overload it, but you got to change it from AC to DC, right? AC DC. Rock on. And charging the battery, and then you got to consider your system, the drawing from the battery, and that's, you know, for Harleys, you got the ECM or the ECU, BCM body control module, the ABS and the instrument module, and then everything else in between. Right. Let's just I'm going to go off on a side sort of tangent here, because the reason I've come to this camera, I wanted to show you a little bit more. Lots of chatter about spark plugs on the Harley Davidson, right? So I'm going to try and do something really snazzy here. Let me see if I can come out of this. No, I won't do that. Let me see if I can do this. Share screen, application, this one, right? Hopefully you can see that, right? And then, so if we look here, this is the from the service manual. If we look here, and this is about checking your spark plugs essentially and replacing them. Now, this section here, let me just come back to this. Can you right, okay, forget it. Can you see this? Yes, can you see this? Right. Oops, sorry, wrong one. There we go. So your spark plugs, right? So your spark plugs here, and right at the bottom here, people are constantly asking me about the state of spark plugs and what is right and what isn't. Okay, so here, this kind of tells you what the different spark plugs are and what to look for, and basically what you want is a kind of white, grayish, powdery finish on the spark plugs when you pull them out to inspect them. And that means that everything's working fine. You haven't got too much fuel. You haven't got not enough fuel going into it. Everything's working fine. When you do stage upgrades, it's something that you may need to check on your bike to see if they've got the mapping correct. And your spark plugs will usually be the first thing that will tell you whether something is balanced or not. Okay. All right. So now the spark plugs here. Before I get on to the next bit here, I want to talk about this. When you put your spark plug back in, there is a here you can see here it's 10 to 15 Newton meters or 89 to 133 inch-pounds torque wrench. Make sure you use a torque wrench. You know, I see a lot of people just, you know, as we would all do in the old days, you just, you know, tighten it and then just tighten it a little bit more and you palm it a little bit, and you know, I would say invest in a torque wrench and just do it properly, because the last thing you want to do is be able to, you know, overdo it and break your spark plug in the head, and that's it, a whole world of shame and hurt. Anyway, so interesting here, when it says about verify that the spark plug threads are clean and dry. Install the spark plugs. It says nothing here in the service manual about putting anti-seize copper grease on your spark plugs threads. I have always done it. I know a lot of people don't. I know a lot of people do. I do it. So let us know in the comments what you think about that. Should you put copper grease on your spark plugs? I would say absolutely, because the last thing you want ever is for your spark plugs to be rusted in ahead and you can't get them out. So personally, that's what I would do. But you know, I take the point. It's not in the service manual, so you shouldn't do it. Personally, I think it should be in the service manual. But there we go. Right. So the next thing I want to talk about, is the gap between the spark plugs. So the spark plugs is on this particular model, the Softails, the M8 engine, the 107 engine that I'm talking about here, and they're using it's 0.8 to 0.9 mil, or it's is that 31 thousandths to 35 thousandths of an inch. Anyway, right. Let me just get rid of that for now. Let me just go back to this one. Right. Okay. So hopefully, right. So I'll come back to some of these comments on it afterwards because there's some interesting ones. Right. So let's just say you've pulled out your spark plug and it looks okay, but you want to give it a bit of a clean, right? So, oops. I just want to show you different spark plugs here. So I don't know, can you see that one? Right. So that one, yeah, it's fouled up quite a lot. There's quite a lot of carbon buildup on it and everything. Yep. That one is just a little bit more. Possibly you can't see it. That one there as well. Yep. That is a brand new one. Okay. Right. Now I've lost the one I wanted to show you. Aha. Right. So then you've got different colors and different amounts of carbon buildup on each one, right? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for the different coloring on it. All of these have got, these are old spark plugs from something else, by the way. And I was always having problems with the fuel air mixture on that. That's why I was always fouling plugs on them. But you got different plugs, different states of problems in the fuel air mixture, which are causing problems on those spark plugs, right? As opposed to a brand new one. Now, just because you've got an old spark plug, it doesn't necessarily mean that's anything wrong with it. And I've got a video coming out about this. You know, it really depends. So, it really depends on the on the condition of it and if it's still producing enough spark and everything like that. Okay, let's just say you want to service your spark plug. So what you'll do, you'll get any kind of cleaning material and you're going to give it a good clean over the top. You can get a wire brush. I wouldn't get a really hard wire brush or anything. Anyway, so you're basically giving it a clean. The electrode at the top here, you get a little bit of a scalpel knife and just give it a little scrape, a little clean. I'm not talking about gouging it. I'm just talking about giving it a good clean, right? Then what you're going to have to do, this is why in the other video I talked about getting these feeler gauges, right? This set of feeler gauges. You're going to have to get the right gauge that is determined by your service manual, and you're going to have to check the gap on it. Right, so you're gonna have to put the feeler gauge through it, and so right, and this one, if this was the correct spark plug for my motorcycle, right now I can't put this feeler gauge through. So what I'd have to do is make sure it's clean in there, but then widen up. If it's too wide, then I have to close it down, just tap it down a little bit until it's, you know, all closed off. It's simple, but it's but you know, lots of people will kind of get a little bit caught up in this as well, you know, so when should you change your spark plugs? Well, it really is an on condition thing. You know, if they're still running fine, you could. Now You could do it after 2 years, a regular service item. Yes, there's no problem. Even if they're working fine, you could do that. But obviously, this adds to the expense of running a motorcycle. You could do it after sort of 20,000 miles, 30,000 miles. That's entirely up to you. Of course. Okay. But you know, whatever you want to do. Now, the other question is, you serviced your spark plugs. They're all good. The ignition coil, the system that's actually sending the signal, sending the pulse to the spark plugs is all working fine as well. Your spark plugs, are working fine. That's okay. Your fuel air mixture is okay. But you feel that, do you know what? I want to change my spark plug. So I want to find an alternative to the spark plug, right? So let's just say, I get lots of these questions as well. And somebody asked me this in a recent video, and I've forgotten your name, so I do apologize. But these kind of things, you probably won't get that. Let's have a look. No, there we go. These are iridium spark plugs, and many of you might have heard of those. So the standard spark plug for the Harley Davidson is the you can have the standard one, which is the 6R10, which is a Harley Davidson made, and that's it's now been changed to the RG6HCC. I'm reading off here now, by the way. I believe they're made by NGK anyway. But there is an alternative, which is an iridium spark plug, which is an NGK CR9EIX. I'm going to show you this, actually. Let me just show the screen for you, because I wanted to show you which one they were. Right, okay, let's do that. Right, so here, these are, I just saw these on Amazon, right? These are replacement ones, OEM replacement spark plugs, if you want that, £39–40. And then these are, just saw these off eBay. These are the iridium ones as well. Okay, so you can get those. Now, just stop that. I'm just going to go back to that. Okay, the question is, do you need to change your spark plugs? Well, that's entirely up to you. Do you just go with stock spark plugs? Well, my take on this is, if they've been absolutely fine, then there's no need to change them, is there? There's not really going to be, you know, for you're riding a Harley Davidson or you're riding a street bike, you're not really talking about high performance issues or requirements. You maybe don't really need to start thinking about changing your spark plugs. However, the whole point of an iridium spark plug is that it can withstand, or it can run hotter temperatures. It's a lot more efficient, and because it's a lot more efficient, it demands less power to drive it. So that saves on your electrical system demand on the motorcycle, but also because it's more efficient, it's actually going to last longer as well. Well, I've got to say, I an older bike, I kind of fell into this trap of saying, right, I'm definitely going to change my spark plug to iridium. So let me just show you what the difference is. Totally different spark plugs. They're not the same. Okay, so this is your standard spark plug. I wish I had a better view. Right, in there. Okay, you got the electrodes, one there and one in the middle, right? And the one in the middle is usually a copper, a standard spark plugs, right? They're usually copper with some kind of nickel outer casing, right? To make them more durable. So basically that's it. And then they're gapped for whatever reason, and they're fine. An iridium one is usually thinner, and it's made of iridium as opposed to copper core. And then it depends, you might have a platinum top here, or you might have an iridium electrode there as well. Because they're more efficient at discharging, it might not be so sensitive to the gapping as well. You might be able to have a bigger gap as well. You have a bigger gap, you have a bigger spark as well. So, you know, pound for pound, those iridium spark plugs are producing more combustion combustibility. That's not even a right word, but you know what I mean. They're giving you more sparks, so you can have more of a combustion start off. It really depends. I'm not convinced that is a need. I think you're always going to be safe with just sticking with OEM spark plugs. I don't really think you need to go with the iridium on a Harley Davidson. Let's say if you're talking about high performance applications, possibly some motorcycles, some performance applications actually want you to use the copper because they run cooler, and there's lots of different things. There's lots of different things to consider when you're talking about spark plugs. Again, I wouldn't say there's absolute necessity. I would say if you just want to be cautious, or you just want to stick with it, fine. There are reports that when you obviously start changing spark plugs out for whatever reason, whatever make, I'm not talking about just iridium, I'm talking about other types, you've got to, it starts affecting other things on the bike as well. So and that combustion process, you might start getting error codes, fault codes, and things like that. So just be aware of what bike you have, how old it is, how sensitive it's going to be with this change to spark plugs, everything like that. If you're not sure, then stick with just standard spark plugs. Okay, so that's just something. Right, okay, let me just get into the here. So Sonics, I replaced a iridium plug on a Honda VFR 1200 at 70,000 miles, and the plugs still look good. Yeah, look, because they do last longer. Sub ignitions are designed to run on iridium plugs. Well, that is true, Dave. Yes, that's absolutely true. Some motorcycles now come with iridium plugs as well. The resistor in modern spark plugs would go bad after time and should be replaced when the service manual says it should be replaced. No, that's not true. That's not true. I'm sorry. Just because the service manual says that it has to be, you should change it, no service manual tells you must change it. Okay, it's on inspection. It's how it's performing. Is it good practice? Yes, it is good practice. Is it wise to change your spark plugs at those intervals as prescribed? Yes, but it doesn't say that you have to. So there we go. If it comes to iridium plugs, that's all you should use. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a safe bet. Whilst I don't, fully agree with everything that's being said here, I think it's a safe bet, really. If you are changing, if you want to change your spark plugs for whatever reason, you don't feel you can clean them up, you don't think that you can gap them right, you think they've been on the bike for, 30,000-40,000 miles, let's say, and it's been 2 or 3 years, whatever, you want to change them. It's not a problem. You're probably going to feel a little bit of a benefit there as well. But if you're pulling out your spark plugs and they're absolutely fine, they're not fouling up, everything's great, give them a clean, save yourself a few pennies. Right, the next thing I want to talk about is the price. Right, so here we're looking at there we go. So a set of Amazon, let's say it's 30-40 pounds. The iridium ones, again, 30-40 pounds of eBay. Actually, just be very aware of where you think you're going to save money in buying any bit for your bike. And whilst I'm not saying that dealerships are the cheapest, sometimes they are. It really depends. Sometimes they might have a deal. Sometimes they might have a pack of old spark plugs that they've just got lying around. I remember when I was looking at spark plugs again, I didn't buy them. I should have bought them at the time, really, for the Softail. But I thought, well, I don't need to change some spark plugs right now. But I think a set of 4 were going for about £20, something like that, which was a lot cheaper than I could buy them online. So it really depends. You might have to, search around. There we go. Feed Me Donuts, what a great name. On my 77 Shellhead, I change and clean every 2,000 miles. Yeah, there's no problems. Engine run rich, and they are black and messy. Yeah. On my Street Glide, a season, they come out quite new. Yeah. Look, every bike is going to be different, of course. You're going to, this is what your maintenance is, but you're absolutely right. It really depends. Your bike, how it's working, the maintenance that you're going to have to do on those bikes, but on those plugs. But essentially, it's how the plug is functioning, if that's working properly. You know, if it's working properly, and you can, you know, the old system of, you know, just taking out the spark plug, connecting it up to the spark plug cap, you know, touching it on the side of the engine casing, you know, firing off the starter and see if it was sparking. If you still got spark there, then you've got spark. Doesn't mean it's the best spark, doesn't mean it's, you know, the most optimum spark, but you've got spark, so that might be enough. It might not be enough, so, you know, there we go. Right, so those are spark plugs. Right, somebody said here about alternators as well. I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. Let me get the right page here, so bear this in mind. Bear with me 1 second. Oops. Electrical, there we go. Right, hold on. Right. I think it's really important, this. I don't want to dig you out here, but this is really important here. Because this comes down to, right, so here, there, I'm going to put this up in here. When we were talking about the alternator earlier on, he said there's a stator, not an alternator. Stator produce full output all the time, where the regulator dumps excess power overboard. Okay, so it's not an alternator. So you're saying it's not an alternator, right? So I want to share the screen here. All right. There we go. Right. So hold on. Sorry. The starter. We're talking about the starter here. And then there we go. Right at the top of the page here. Can we see it? It says alternator. The whole thing is called an alternator on the alternator rotor remove and installer. The alternator rotor, okay, and then you've got the alternator stator. So the alternator, rotor, and stator. There we go. So it is an alternator. Okay. That's it. It's not a DC generator or anything like that. It is an alternator. So I'm not sure if we're getting lost in translation here or whatever. But anyway, right. So I think it's really important to clear that up. Right. So the electrical system. Let's just talk a little bit about that. I've been going on quite a while now, I know. So hopefully you're getting some benefit from this as well. So the main points where you're going to be able to access your electrical system is the left side cover. Take that off and you're going to be able to get into your fuses. Okay, you're going to be able to get into your fuses, you basically got 4 fuses there. You've got your system fuse, you've got your battery tender fuse, you've got your battery fuse, and you've got your main fuse. Anytime you're working on your bike, you want to take that big main fuse out, that 40 amp, I believe it is, fuse out. Just take it out and away you go. But under the seat, if you take the seat off, you're going to see on top there, you're going to see lots of electrical connections and everything like that. And that usually a lot of those connections are going to the rear of the bike for the lighting as well, turn indicators, that kind of thing. You're also going to have, and this is where you can also tap into the bike as well to add electrical accessory harness as well. You can watch my other video for that as well. So all that kind of all that kind of thing there. Beneath there, obviously you got the battery, you got the ECM, you got the BCM, you got the ABS module, under the seat area, everything like that. So that's where you can add accessories as well. You can add especially with an accessory harness, you could add heated seats, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of that accessory harness, you can have it so it's on ignition only. So therefore, if you turn on your heated seats, they only turn on when the ignition is on, not when connected to the battery. As I say, I would always say, I would say never have anything directly connected to the battery unless you're absolutely conscious of the fact that you're going to be switching it on or switching it off. Right. Okay. So that's under the seat, right? That's where you got most of your components. The other part of the electrical system on the bike that you're most likely to be engaged with is going to be in the front at the fuel tank. So you got your instrument module there. Beneath the fuel tank, you've got some electrical connections as well. But then you've got the USB caddy as well. So then that's where the electrical power comes up for your instrument module, but also goes to your USB caddy as well. And that's where, as I showed you in another video, where you can actually put in a accessory wiring harness, plug it in there at that point inside the USB caddy, and you can tap into the 12-volt supply there. Then the other thing, obviously, you got to consider the other part of your electrical system is where you control it on. You are the pilot in the cockpit, as it were. You've got to be able to control it, and that's basically on your handlebars and your switch gear, left and right. Okay, and then obviously you got your lights, you got your headlights. You're going to have some wiring in there, and obviously your turn signals, right? So if you watch my other videos also about adding the auxiliary lights, that's all kind of explained. But one of the things I kind of get asked questions about as well when I'm showing how I did it, people talk about the power to the switch gear and how you can change the switch gear. They're kind of all not sealed units, but they're all kind of bonded units with the switch gear. And again, because it's working off the CAN bus system, you've got to think less in terms of power to the switch gear, but more about signals to the switch gear. And the switch gear, either ECM or BCM is going to be controlled by that. Whatever button you press is going to send a signal back to the BCM, which then is going to fire off a signal to your light, whatever, to your turn indicator to, flick it on or flick it off, so that's it. I think just from memory now, I think the right hand switch gear has a power negative supply to it. I can't write. I'll have to look at the wiring diagram. Be sure. The left one doesn't. It just has the wiring, the CAN bus wiring, the signal wiring going to it. So it's all about signals rather than power, especially to the switch gear. So that's what I mean. You don't need the power going backwards and forwards. You just need the signal. Now, let's just say if we went back to older bikes and let's say we want to do a custom bike, or we want to do a bobber, we want to do a chopper and everything. Actually, what you could do in the old system, you could actually just say, right, we're going to get rid of all of this cabling. We're going to make a lot of the frame of the earth as well. We're going to get rid of the frame. We're going to chop the wiring here, there, and everywhere. So you're going to reduce the amount of wiring. With a new bike, unfortunately, you're not really going to be able to do that because you're going to need this signal system. It's pretty much as streamlined as it can be for the components that it's got on there. And let's face it, the wiring isn't a major concern, but it might be in terms if you wanted to make a bobber out of it because you want to hide the wiring. So you need to, come up with a different way. But there isn't a lot of options really in terms of modern bikes. Now, obviously, we've got to talk about regulation as well, because you might be in a different part of the world where they won't allow you to run without lights or run without indicators, turn signals, all that kind of stuff. Now, there we go. Right, so the other thing I want to talk about is, so under the tank, you got the USB caddy. Beneath the USB caddy in the frame, you pull out the electrical rubber gator. You've got all the switches there, all the electrical connections for going up to your handlebars and your turn indicators and all that kind of stuff. Within there, you've got and this is another question I get asked as well. So let me see if I can quickly find this for you. Let me just have it. Here we go. Electrical wiring. No, that's not the one. I just want to get rid of that. Hold on. I'm going to try and find it on the wiring harness for you guys. No, I can't really find it now. The control module. No. There is, here we go. That's the front. So bear with me 1 second. I'm just trying to bring up these, the schematic, the diagram for the electrical. Here we go. Right. So no, that's not it. Is that it? Nope. Hold on. Bear with me. Right. Okay. Why can't I find the... Oh, here we go. Right. Crikey. Blimey. Sorry about that. Right. Okay, let me just do this. Share this screen. That one. Right. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully you can see this. Right. So here, this is the tank has been taken off, and you've got the electrical connectors behind that rubber gating, rubber seal here. So then you've got all yours going up to the switch gear, your twist grip, wheel speed sensors, all that kind of stuff for the right hand side, left hand side, everything. But here, right at the top, not right at the top, sorry, this one here, one of the small ones here, you'll see there is a this number 2 here. This is for the heated hand grip. Right. So let me get rid of that. Right. So one of the questions I get is for adding heated hand grips on your motorcycle, and people ask, can you just power it from there? The problem is, no, you can't, because that power, that connector there under the seat is actually, so not under the seat, under the tank in there, is more about connecting the left side and the right side rather than producing the power. Powering the system. You need to actually have a proper system. There's so many problems with putting the heated hand grips on the bike. Now, obviously, the Harley Davidson ones, yeah, they will work. But let's say if you want to put external, aftermarket ones, let's say Oxford, quite a few riders have had issues with that as well. So, you have to, you may not even employ that, but you might have to have separate wiring that goes out. You may have to do a whole handlebar job to route the wiring through and everything like that. So the heated hand grips for the Harley Davidson ones, a lot of the wiring is already there for it. You just need to get the power to it. But external, so aftermarket handlebar heated grips, you might not have to work. And sometimes that interferes with the other problems that you've got on the other connections that you've got on the bike as well. You start to overload the system, and you need to find different ways to find a power source. Let's say if you've got cruise control, you want auxiliary lighting, that kind of thing, and then you want to put heated grips on there as well. It's where it is. Right. So, but anyway, that little electrical connector there, which I showed you, that is more about connecting the left side and the right side together. I can't remember. I'd have to look at the actual wiring diagram. I can't remember exactly offhand, but it's less about actually providing the power. That the power doesn't come from there. It's a power. It's part of the power system, but it's not all the power that is required. Anyway, so this is more relevant, as I say, if you are putting aftermarket heated grips on, because the Harley heated grips are, I don't know, what, a couple of £100? I can't remember. They're really expensive, aren't they? Where you can get heated grips from Oxford for, I don't know, 80, 90, £100, something like that, which, half the price really. But obviously it won't be a nice clean look as with the ones that Harley already produce, of course. Right. Anyway, look, I've been going for nearly an hour and a half here. Blimey. Anyway, so there's, all you've got to consider is with the electrical system that obviously there is a load, there's demand, there's what it's able to supply, and as long as everything's working in tip-top condition, You should, you'll be fine. All the power comes from the battery. It's charged by the alternator, and then you obviously got the different system on the bike. The CAN bus system, the power system, or you can go external directly from the battery to feed whatever you need. You have got those accessory wiring harnesses to add all your accessories. Heated seats, GPS, whatever. But obviously, you just got to be mindful of what load you're putting onto the bike as well, electrical load. And then if you are doing any work on your bike, just get some half decent tools. This is probably the best one to get your multimeter. And that will be able to, so you can check things if things are going wrong. If you do have problems with starting the bike or electrical issues, usually they stem from an electrical issue rather than a mechanical issue. It's rare, even now, it's rare that you have a mechanical failure just like that. It does happen, but it's very rare. The most likely is that if you're having problems with your bike, let's say starting or rough running or whatever, it's usually down to electrical rather than mechanical. But that's it. But obviously it really depends. Okay, right. Should we get into some of the questions here? Right. Right, here we go. My shove. Here we go. My shove when I was fine, my M8 is worse. Okay. Oh, so you think your show head is better? Yeah. Okay, let's get rid of that. Iffy fueling. Dave B, sorry. If the fueling is right, they last years. Yep, that's right. Phoebe Donuts, my 97 Fat Boy Evo, 2,000 miles, second clean gap reinsert. Yeah, we talked about this earlier on. Mine are black, no tuner open, J&H. Yeah, you've got Jekyll and Hyde, haven't you? Jekyll and Hyde exhaust you're on about there, aren't you? Your spark plugs are black. Yeah. I think we talked about this in comments on another video, didn't we? Talk about that. If it produces AC, it's an alternator. Yeah, 80% charge at idle. Is that what you're confirming? What I said there? Possibly. I can't remember exactly what it charges at, but it might be a little bit more than that. I'm not 100% sure. Different bikes and different alternators will have different things. I'm looking forward to the day when you can get the software for all this stuff. Then we're back in. Do you know what? That's absolutely right. One of the problems that we're crying out for is to be able to properly interrogate from a home, from you guys, for you, me, we're all the same, from home, that you can actually interrogate from home your bike. If there's a way, and properly, just like they do in the dealerships, the digital technician too, but they've got the monopoly on that. I know they are working on systems right now. There's a company in Italy that was working on it, but I can't seem to find them anymore. So I don't know what's happened to them, but there we go. Signals is in power outer. Dump the ECU band. Get a card. Here we go. Only power my 97 Fat Boy is the tail light and headlight and speedo. Rest of the was stripped and dumped, so no turn signals. Yeah, I mean, let's say here in the UK, I can't remember what it is. I can't remember if it was 1980 or could have been 82 or something. Any bike that was produced before a certain year, we don't have to have turn signals on them. So if you're building a chop, for example, a bobber or chop, whatever, legally you don't have to have indicators on there. However, if the turn-in signals are on the motorcycle, physically on there, they have to be working regardless. Okay, so it really depends. It depends where you are in the world and what you can get away with, and all that kind of stuff. So let's say if I'm building a new custom bike now, let's say, and it's after that year, I'm going to have to find a way of putting in turn signals, let's say, or lighting, or whatever it is, that it complies with the law so that it will pass its annual roadworthiness check and all that sort of stuff, and also that I won't get stopped by the police every 5 minutes and given a fine. Entirely carb. Swiss allow no turn signals, only front lamp and brake light. Okay. That's interesting. I don't know now in Swiss, but in the year, no chance of 97 bike. Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, 97. I don't think so as well. I think it's all a lot earlier. I can't remember what it is. But again, EU rules and UK rules, might be different. Now we're out of Europe, it might be changing again. Who knows? So much misinformation. N4 Zoo. I don't know what you're relating that to. I'm not sure. Is me? Possibly. Yeah, possibly. I can only say what I know. I may be wrong on some places. I may have misspoke. I don't know. In Swiss speed, in terms of I'm not checked for safety, you put whatever you want on the bike as long as it has a headlight and stop lamp, you're good to go. Roundabout. Wow, really? Do you know what? That's interesting you say that, because I've heard so many things about Switzerland and how strict they are on having, the bike must be standard and everything working. So I could be wrong there. Yeah. There we go. Swiss, no EU country high. It isn't in the Swiss, but I always thought it was really strict. Anyway, look, I've waffled on for too long. Hopefully, you've got an idea there of what I'm talking about and the kind of things. So, because I'm always cautious about tapping into a brand new motorcycle. And also, you've got to think of this. I haven't talked about warranty at all. Of course, I haven't. That's something you've got to consider as well. You don't want to do anything that's affect your electrical system that could affect your warranty. If you don't care about that, then you'll be absolutely fine. But what I'm saying is be very careful when you do tap into it. It doesn't affect any other systems. And then whatever load you're putting onto it, make sure that it's all okay. But anyway, right. So there's lots of things to consider. There's lots of things to see if it's going to work properly, if it's going to affect anything. Does it interfere with anything else like that? Knowing Harley Davidson, as we all do, any old excuse for them to get out of, paying something, that's the way it is. Anyway, listen, I'm going to head on out here. So hopefully you've got a good idea of some of the tools, some of the things to consider. So whatever bike it is, it's exactly the same. You just need to know where the wiring is, what is being fed, whether it's an old bike, new bike. Good service manual will be able to sort you out on that. And if not, if you haven't got a service manual, a lot of the time you just you can find your way around, especially with the older bikes. The newer bikes, it's more difficult. There we go. Right, anyway, hope you found that useful. I'm going to head on now. I may come on later again. It really depends if I can get this to work. I might test it out, but I'd say I'm not going to overdo it. But anyway, hope you found that useful. I must be tired for talking all the time. I don't know how I did it. The time went, but there we go. Right. I think we need to come up with a different idea. Let us know in the comments below what sort of subject you want me to cover or discuss in future ones as well. But as I say, and also if you've got your own ideas or your own things as well, and I don't expect people to agree with me, and crikey, and please tell me if I'm saying something wrong. But by all means, and any other topic I'm willing to discuss, no issues at all. Right, I think I deserve a coffee, don't you? Right, take it easy, guys. Thanks for joining, and thanks for all the comments and everything like that. Really appreciate it. Just before I go, those of you who are still with me there, I am trying to. I'll probably leave this for another. I'll leave that for another. I was just going to say something, but I'll leave that for another live stream. Anyway, possibly that's what I'm going to talk about the next one. Yeah, I'll leave that. Bit of a mystery there. All right, catch you again. Ta-ra.